Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jose Adorno. I'm the Digital ATN Coordinator at Digital ATN in Advance. I'm accompanied by Mary Kate Haverly, which is our Digital ATN Specialist. And today we are going to present our second round of presentations on the digital literacy curriculum. This one in particular is called DART Implementation, Onboarding, and Strategies. This is going to be slightly different than the first one. We'll go on how the differences are going to look like, but also we would like to be able to have you guys share. And I'll pause at different slides. So if you're using Dart, if there's any strategies that align to the slides that we were talking about, we would like to listen and stop and listen to you, so that way we could all learn together. With that, we'll get started. I would ask that if you have introduce yourself, put your name, where you're from. That way everyone could get acquainted. And we could use the chat for questions, or you can also unmute and talk as well. We love to hear both in text and be hearing your voice. Welcome, everyone. Before we get started, we are going to talk about briefly what is ATDN and Digital ATDN. The Adult Training and Development Network. Our service is funded by the Connecticut State Department of Education, the Academic Office, to provide training opportunities and resources for adult education programs across the state. They're also home to professional and comprehensive in-person and online training for adult education professionals in numerous areas across the state. Our agenda for today, we have four different areas that we're going to be covering. Number one, we're going to explore how DART builds foundational skills that support digital literacy and development. We're going to identify strategies for integrating DART into existing instruction. We're going to reflect on connections between language, process, and digital skills. And finally, we're going to share classroom practices and challenges related to digital skill development. This last one is the part where you come in, right? Throughout this session, we want to hear about your classroom practices, or what overlaps from Dart to what you're currently doing, and what ways that Dart could actually also help you integrate some of these or develop some of these skills that are present in the curriculum in your classroom. So I would say I'm curious to know if your agency is using Dart. So if you put it in the chat, you could say number one if you are familiar with Dart, and number two if your agency is using Dart. And if you don't know, that's okay as well. So perfect. So with that, I'm going to talk briefly about what is Dart, or what is Dart designed for, and then we'll continue. So earlier in our sessions in January, we talked about digital literacy curricula. And that takes three common curricula that we recommend for digital literacy development at the agency. And we place this in a spectrum. So if you're looking towards the right, you have Google Applied Digital Skills. In the middle, you have North Star. And on the left, you have Dart. And as you can see how the color changes from green, which is requiring more or some foundational digital literacy, moving into your yellow, which targets a lot of that foundational digital literacy, and then Dart, which takes another step back, that focuses on not just the foundations but also the language. So we're looking at here learners that are beginner or pre-beginner ESL, that have limited or no keyboard experience, that might be familiar with smartphones but not with computers, and if they need access or some access to some support before they could be independent with the technology. When we're looking at smartphones as well, smartphones can be in a different language, in their native language. So also it's looking at how they're interacting with the technology and how they will translate that literally, right, into English so they could be able to use other devices. In order to give you a little bit more context as to how Dart is different than the other two curriculum, we want to share here a correlation. So this document was created a couple years ago with different correlations of different resources to get an understanding of when we're looking at reading content, how does that align to the levels that are of the students that are in your classroom. So if you look at here, this first row, this is going to be the CASA scores. So it's broken down by, you have here, I'll go down to the first one. You have your beginner ESL literacy, which is 183 and below. You have your low ESL, which is 184 to 196. And you have high ESL. Um, I need to add beginner, so I'll fix that. So it'll be low beginner ESL and high beginner ESL. And then high beginner ESL is 197 to 206. Each of these correlate to the NRS level. So your ESL NRS level 1 for ESL is that beginner ESL literacy. Your low ESL is your ESL level 2, and your high beginner ESL is your ESL level 3. This all three align to CCRS level 9 objectives. So if you're trying to get your learners into that context of college and career. Oh, there's another person. Into that college and career um, mindset and kind of developing some of those skills, then you're looking at objectives from that CCRS level 9. Then you have your Lexile here as well as your grade level equivalent if you're looking at reading here. The reason why we wanted to start off with this is that when we were talking about the three different curriculum, there's one that's called North Star that you might all be familiar with. There's a statewide license that's available. A lot of we have over 40 agencies that are opted in that statewide license. But one of the challenges for a lot of the access to that curriculum is because of the CASA's reading score. North Star states that they recommend a 211 CASA's reading score for those learners to be able to engage into the online modules that are provided in North Star. So if we look at 211 here, where out of these 5 categories, we can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where would that be placed under? So you can number, where do you see that 211 score on this? There you go. Yep. 2, right? It's a level 2 right here. And in this case, if we're looking at NRS level, it's an ESL level 4. So that means that students that are in levels 1, 2, and 3 are not able to independently work with North Star because they have that language gap. And a lot of our learners, of course, when we're looking at ESL, are in those first 3 levels. And you can see that big range. And even if you're looking at the low intermediate ESL, you're looking at about halfway of that too. So even if you scaffold, you have a good chunk of students that need that additional support and scaffolding to be able to not just interact with technology, but also understand what you're trying to teach them when you're looking at that. So that's where Dart comes into play. It's targeting not just the foundation digital literacy, but it's also focusing on the language portion, which is very important in order for them to understand and contextualize what they're doing in the class. Here is more bullets on how this looks like based on I just talked about them, so I won't read them out to you. But it just goes again into like how is Dart different from the other digital literacy programs. And the key thing here is that it's not just looking at foundations, but it's looking at language. And we'll see that a little bit more as we continue. A very popular section of the curricula that comes up in my conversations with agencies is actually the estimated instructional hours to complete Dart. And it's, as we see, it's very extensive. It's very extensive once we start to see beginner, which are NRS 0, which is stated as 50 hours. Then you have 0 to 2, which is 35 to 45. You have your beginner EL English language learners, which are still not on able to work with North Star, which is 30 to 40. And then you start to see your intermediate English language levels. That's when you start to be able to kind of bridge into North Star, and then you're advanced. The key thing that I want to point out here is that it doesn't mean that you need to teach in isolation digital literacy. There is a lot of the students need a lot of support, but if I'm talking here for an entire hour to you, there's not much you're going to learn. It's going to be very passive. It's not an opportunity for you to apply. So looking into this, this instructional hour format is going to be how you apply technology or provide those opportunities for your learners to engage in different ways. So it's not just learning how to click, but knowing how they would navigate in different scenarios through different technology that you're using in the classroom. We have what's the it's part of the appendix. It's Appendix A, and it's called Curriculum Milestones. This is a very brief summary of each milestone. The purpose of this was to give you a quick view of what Dart ranges in regards to lesson breakdown. I went in through to all the different lessons and I assigned them based on what milestone they're somewhat targeting. And as you can see here, our first one is use a keyboard with letters, numbers, and symbols. This is the first thing the first 7 lessons focus on building the knowing the alphabet in uppercase and lowercase, how to interact with the keyboard, how do you use the numbers, how do you use the symbols, and it starts from the smartphone perspective. Dr. Glenda Rose, which is one of the authors of the curriculum, had shown us and I think those that I attended also ESL Day was able to see that on how a keyboard in a different language, it's very hard to understand or navigate if you don't know what the characters mean. So Dart's initial approach is to work on that, on setting up one of the things that we use the most, which is a keyboard when we're on a computer, and how to navigate that. And then from there, I'll show you how to log in and out of a computer, navigate the desktop and apps, and it goes through up till you have some, logging into email and recognizing scam and troubleshooting some basic issues. With that, I want to pose 2 questions that you could use to chat or you could unmute. And question number 1, which one of the core milestones do you struggle the most with your learners? Second question here is what strategies have you used to support and help learners overcome their barriers of entry? And you could unmute if you liked as well.
Hi, I'm Caitlin from Literacy Volunteers, and I was just looking at the The navigating the desktop and apps is usually where my learners struggle the most if they don't have that experience already, because they're a little familiar with logging in and out of things and keyboards from their smartphones. Not all of them, but many. And it's that as soon as we're using multiple different programs at the same time, trying to understand what a web browser is and how to navigate to a website versus using the application version of it, like on Zoom, for example. Um, and the way that I have been able to, the strategies we've been using has just been a lot of practice of repetition, with the muscle memory of doing a lot of these with a lot of support. It's not easy to do with every class and every group that we have, but it's just a lot of guided practice. Is mostly what we've done.
Thank you so much. That's a great example of right of that of if you're looking at all that practice, all that stacks into the if you're using it for a class and you're working with your Zoom students in Zoom, then you're actually stacking that amount of that instructional time that was recommended earlier at the beginning, right? So it's more in context practice of what you're using versus um, just trying to teach in isolation. Like this is how you use it. This is how you use it. This is how you use it.
Yeah,
Thank you,
right,
Carrie.
exactly.
Hi, this is Kathy Leonardo from Shoreline. Caitlin, I ran into the same issues that I was having with my students who I had seen for multiple sessions for digital literacy, and it was always a struggle. They can use the students can use their phones with a lot more ease than, whether we pick up Chromebooks or a laptop. So I found that I actually took pictures of what the screens were with each move, um, from logging in to opening it up to the screen that they see when they first have to click OK. And I separated it by Chromebook and then by laptop. And that seemed to have helped. Like I have a couple copies printed with me um, when I start class, and I let those students work as independently as possible until they really are struggling, because a lot of our students who fall in that realm of using Dart still struggle with the language so much. Um, so that was one thing that I don't know if you have the opportunity to do that, but I did print the steps. I kept it to like 5 steps and printed them in color. And it seemed to have helped our students who were still finding that barrier of logging in.
I love that idea. Thank you. I'm thinking of how I could print out these versions to give out at at when they register for classes, if they're signing up for an online class, just having something that they can have to take with them, so it's not waiting until in the moment. So thank you.
Right. I used Google Slides. I just put the pictures with some directions into Google Slides. And then, I mean, Canva, I don't know if you use Canva. That's always a
Yes, we do. But
always
both
a
both of
win.
those are great. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Canva is so pretty how to lay it out, everything so you could follow along. And like going to both points, right? If you're navigating five different programs, then it if you have five different steps, they're not all accessed the same way. So if you have a limited amount of applications that you're trying to focus on, then that ability for repetition then increases because then you're relying on those tools. So thank you both for sharing. There's a couple notes, messages also. I'm going to read them out. So one says the keyboard, since sometimes students have native languages like Chinese, which are different. Exactly, right? Even the way I speak Spanish, so I could get away with understanding some of the words. My where I'm still messed up is pronunciation. The word that I don't know, not familiar with, I'm most likely reading in Spanish or give it some Spanish connotation to it. Um, and then we have another one here. It says navigate the desktop and apps. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. So this here, I won't go too much into this. I did wanted to show you where you could find this. So these are the milestones. They go a little bit more in depth, and they talk about, as you can see, you have the title, the technology skills required, and the English language skills required. So for each of the milestones, which if you can, what I'll do is I'll show you this way so you can see it. This is page 19. Sorry for the scrolling. Should have scrolled first. So in the actual curriculum, which is linked everywhere that we have something that we're referencing, and I'll put it here in the chat. On page 17 is all the appendices. This is a very important piece of the curriculum, and I'll go over this a little later, but basically they give you a lot of context and strategies that are not present in the lessons themselves. Um, so as we're going to see one of them, you're going to see the difference if you're trying to focus on a portion of the curriculum versus all the lessons. But that's page 17. You have all the lists there. And we're going to go into 19. I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can see it. Follow along. Here you'll have your milestones, which it's more specific. As you see here, 11 digits long. Typing, I'll use a keyboard to type. Yeah. And then what is required in both technology and in English language skills. And I'll go through that across. So based on this, so we had navigating, so that was 4, access and navigate a website using a computer. No. Use Windows desktop to open an app, manipulate and navigate the app window. So you're looking between 3 and 4. This is going to give you some context as to where you're going to focus on if that's the particular milestone you're trying to work with. Sometimes we think curricula, we think we have to do everything. It's based on, you have a limited amount of time with your students. What should you focus on? This document could give you an idea of how you're going to place that. The other document that's also good to look at is the lessons at a glance, which then will tell you what materials and what's available here, and then you can make your determination there. They also have like all the objectives once you scroll a little bit more, and they have when you look at the objectives, you'll see sorry again all the scrolling. Here you go. You have your objectives, and you'll see what objectives are covered in each lesson. So if you're trying to skim through and find if Start has something that your learners are struggling with, then this is another great way to get an idea of what you need to work on instead of just trying to look at every lesson individually. Go back here. And again, you have a link here. And the goal that I try to aim here was so you could have the full document here, so you can see both if you're just looking at the slides, but then you have your ability to go in and look at the appendix itself. So the next thing here, and we briefly touched upon it last on our earlier session, was how Dart lessons structured. And they go over the 5E instructional model. I have a link here and I have the descriptions here. So it's engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. But we're going to look at this applied to give you a little bit more context of how this actually looks like in the classroom. All the lessons, like mentioned, are following these 5 E's. So as an example here, you have engage, which will be introduce a topic or vocabulary, and then the digital skill collection here is build familiarity with digital language. Something that they already do on your smartphone or in the context that you're actually learning under. If you're doing family literacy, class and you're talking about library, this is a good way to kind of introduce and put into context that vocabulary vocabulary, digital literacy vocabulary you're working on. You have here explore, so learners try an activity and they practice following instructions. This is going back to like Kathy's recommendation on having those instructions for them to follow. You have explain, which is clarify concept or vocabulary, which is understanding the technology terminology. Sometimes I'm here using the pointer to point out and focus on specific areas. That's something as me as a teacher, I'm using my pointer to focus and just using that vocabulary in the context and highlighting that. You have elaborate, which is applying the skills in task. Here you build confidence, completing processes. And then you have evaluate, reflect or check understanding, identifying what learners can do independently. And this also helps us figure out what do we need to do next in order to go back and look at how how can our next time or next lesson, how can I support them more? And then I would elaborate onto these four pieces here, other four phases. So here I wanted to pause and I just wanted to ask from these five, which one is your go-to when you're teaching or you're working with learners? Do you look at more engage, explore, explain? Back in my teaching days, I would do engage a lot. I always had to kind of contextualize what I was trying to teach. And that was my go. I'll go way, way into it, into the engage portion. And then I'm like, wait, I need to make sure that they can show them how to do it. Yeah. Okay, so I have the response here. Apply the skills in tasks.
Is that what you asked, Jose?
Yes, yes, definitely.
Okay.
So in your case, it will be elaborate. Yeah. So
Yes, sorry.
yeah. No, no, that's good because we're following the row. So
I find that with language learners, the it's very difficult. You can stand in front of the room and use total physical response and gestures and things like that, but until the students are actually applying those tasks in, for a purpose, um, they really they have to see what the outcome is. So when you're using the skill and they could see the outcome, I think it helps solidify it a little bit better for them.
that's true. If they can't contextualize that, most of the time we lose them because of that. If they don't see the value of or the importance of it, of how they could help them. It's like, I mean, I don't want to say it's like kids, but kind of thing. They don't see anything that they can benefit off of it, especially with the amount of time that they the limited amount of time that they have. Then we lose them, and then we have explore, elaborate or explore. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Now we're going to go to another appendix, and this one is vocabulary instructions, Appendix D. So in this, there's a lot of, you will see the vocabularies across the lessons, but the important piece of the appendix is that it offers a lot more than just the vocabulary words. It gives you the technology related vocabulary for each lesson, for all of the lessons. I had take that. Strategies for introducing and practicing new terms. It includes activities that help learners use vocabulary in context and support for multilingual and bilingual learners. So this is on page 35. We'll go here to the page 35. Well, actually, it's not 35. It's page 33. It's page 33. 35 is where the vocabulary words are. So here you have your pre-teaching vocabulary. It goes over how would you teach it in the lesson. So if you need some strategies to teach under ESL, this is a good way to do it. Again, this DART curriculum approaches it as if you're having a tutor, let's say, support, or or you have someone that's offering tech that needed some scaffolding strategies to reach out to English language learners. So these first 2-3 pages are going to focus on how would you incorporate strategies, how will you introduce new vocabulary words, how do you make those connections with existing practices that the student might have, and then how would you do some of the assessments. So we'll just walk you through a few scenarios on how to do that. And then you go into part 35, which is what I've labeled here, will give you then what is the vocabulary words for each lesson. So again, if you're looking at specific areas, you're not necessarily looking at going over the entire lesson, then you're able to pinpoint what vocabulary words you could focus on based on what you see um, in each lesson. You're incorporating it into your current practice. Okay, I see someone also agreed with the elaborate or explore. Awesome. Okay. So here it puts some content similar to what we did with the 5Es. This is not applying 5Es necessarily, um, but gives you a little bit more if you're looking for some, like how would you do this? This is an example. So you have your introduced vocabulary, which is teaching the key digital terms, right? You're building that familiarity with technology, language. This introduction could be as you're doing the class, maybe it's not even digital literacy, but you're using if students are using Google Slides um, on their own, but you're modeling a part of the lesson, then you could focus some of those, um, kind of do like a visual walkthrough every time, and you're kind of have like that narrator voice as you're doing things to kind of model, right? Then you have your use vocabulary in context. Here you practice through examples and discussions. You help learners understand instructions. So that again, that's applying those support documents that you're using for your learners, um, and going into that um, repetition through that use of technology under that same circumstance, like if we're using Zoom to be able to connect to Zoom, and just kind of helping them understand what happens when you do this and click that. Then you have reinforced through activities. And then from here, you strengthen comprehension and retention, sometimes using different. I like to use reading skills for today. They have a lot of different texts for many different levels, and that helps out to just understand or put it in context, like what technology is used under those circumstances. Like if you're trying to take a bus, right now, if you take a bus, you might use GPS. You might go online and look up what the bus schedule is and that kind of thing. So you're bringing in other relevant topics into that conversation. And then you have apply vocabulary in tasks. If again, if they're bouncing off ideas off of that reading text, as an example, having them using that vocabulary and those supporting documents that you're providing. Yeah. So here I'll pause again. Any instructional strategies that we have listed here, um, I'll put it both ways. Do you use any of these strategies? Do you use a different strategy? Or will you use or consider any of these existing strategies that you see here? That way I'll allow anyone, any context to respond. Okay, so we have one reinforcement, right? Yeah, that's where that practice is going to come in and that repetition. Dialogues in context. Yes. All of them. Yeah, exactly. All of them. Yeah. So yeah, yeah, we got three, all of them. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. We have one more slide here on, give me 1 second. There we go. I might need to light this up. It looks a lot darker now. But these are some very easy ways to add digital vocabulary without changing your lesson. One of the concerns with, and I just kept this here so you guys could have it with your resources. Part of the constraint is the time constraint, right? If you have learners for a smaller um, time, how do you really build the digital literacy foundation, or start building that digital literacy foundation? So DART is a curriculum that bridges into North Star, and it's written in the curriculum itself. So starting at around lesson 10, DART starts to optional. Of course, it has its lessons that can work on their own, but they start to integrate a lot more some of the concepts that are in North Star's basic computer skills, internet basics, and using email, those three modules. So by the time, if you're going through the curriculum and you're working through those lessons 10 and up, then you're kind of bridging them and getting them ready to be able to use North Star. I wouldn't say independently, but at least they'll have that familiarity, right? You're introducing those words outside of using the curriculum and giving that opportunity for them to work on, um, to get familiar with the vocabulary words, to get familiar with digital skills that we're working on in the class, instead of just giving them access to the module and then they don't know where to click and those kind of things. So a lot of that foundation is built in Dart itself, and it's one of the most common ways that a lot of the North Star users have used North Star. They'll start with basic computer skills, and they might continue with internet basics, and they find that their learners are struggling. They'll go into Dart and use the Dart lesson to provide that scaffolding needed for them to just build that foundation, and then from there they'll resume again into North Star. So there's different levels of application when you're using um, when you're using Dart here. But again, the focus that Dart provides is that the focus that Dart provides is tied to that language development that we're trying to reach, because we can't reach our students as we saw at the beginning. You have your ESL over 1, 2, and 3 that are not really getting that support from North Star or Google Applied Digital Skills. And not that they don't get the support, it's that that language, it's not there for them to understand those concepts that you're trying to introduce, because the English level is too high. So I have this that I'll share with you when you see it, as a couple of ways that you could use. Um, I will actually open here if you have any questions. Is there anything that you're interested in checking out? If they are, looking into these, maybe you have a strategy that you want to share, or if you're using Dart, what have you used from Dart that has worked out for you, or something that maybe there's something that you wish that Dart had that doesn't have at the moment that you want to share.
Well, I'll just say, based on what Catherine was telling me about, the visual printouts, it would be great to have other software images, right? It says, I was looking at the lesson 11, right? Because that's what we had mentioned about being helpful. And it has a great visual of the Windows desktop, but specifically one version of it, which is a good start. I mean, it would be cool though to have some what a Chromebook screen looks like, or an older or newer Windows desktop as well. But I do really like the way that it looks, on the way that it's labeled very clearly. Uh, it mentioned under 11, um, the lesson 11 using the Windows desktop. The first resource was 11.1, the Windows desktop, and then there was the handout assessment that went with it. Yes, exactly, that's the one. I really like how it was labeled very clearly, and I can definitely make a version of that for the Chromebooks that I loan out to my students. But yeah, so.
I would say I wish there was more of a hands-on, like when I put in learning chocolate or use things from Burlington English to kind of like connect these parts, because Burlington English has an area where they're talking about the computer and stuff, and then the students get to um, move the labels or something. I feel like if we're wanting them more on the computer, we need more of them like doing the activity hands-on on the screen, moving it, labeling it.
I have made similar activities like that from just using the Zoom whiteboard or a Google Classroom, um, because that does work really effectively, right? Kind of a click and drag word bank. This one does have a blank version, that they can fill in themselves, but it still requires a little bit of DIY.
To go back to the hope of something they had more like the hands-on. Are you looking more like application based? Or are you looking at, let's say, this here, but you wanted that to be like, say, interactive, where they would go and click here and put in what it is, or that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably have to say application based, because for our students, being majority of them um, don't have computers at home, being able to have an app on their phone and still work on the activities and labeling and stuff if I wanted to give it to them as an assignment. However, I think having that dual use where if I'm giving them an assignment to review vocabulary, they can do the app, but then if they're in class, maybe a fill-in by having a word bank on the board, and then them being able to work on their typing skills. I mean, I think that would help also, but definitely something where I'm not just showing it to them and then handing them a printout, or, um, you know, taking all the time and taking the sheet here and then creating an interactive one um, on my own, because this way, as the system is altering each time, that the updates will alter also.
Yeah, that's been a challenge. Even updates on devices, and then Google is a great example for that, right? So you do something one way, and then all of a sudden, a secret update that you didn't know about comes up, and then all of a sudden, it changes how you would do something, and then that throws us off too. Um, but so okay, so if we would say this is more like a follow up question, if we would say that these are interactive, or let's say there's one lesson that we could make interactive, what would it be? What lesson would you like it to be interactive if you had to pick? Or what application? So let's say there's something specific that you're looking for it to be interactive so you can use for your class to practice. What would it be? If you have one. You can put it in the chat or you could unmute and share.
I think it's hard to say just one. Like this would definitely be one, the one that you have currently up, because it's something that I would be able to send out to all of our teachers and tell them, hey, just review this with your students before I come in and do a North Star, or before I come in, because I do the push in for the North Star. For the beginners, we do more of the dart. But then again, just have these up so that when I'm discussing it with your students, they can easily access it. But this would definitely be one because it's like when you're asking your students to mute their computer, you can see you have the volume circle there. When you're asking them to go to a certain thing, like let's say the Chrome, the Google Chrome, you can see that it's pointed there. What is that? Maybe label a few different things, like as they have it on North Star. You have Firefox. Just different items, I guess maybe like put more things on that one screen, because if I'm using Learning Chocolate, it doesn't have a lot of these options on there. So when I'm trying to introduce a unit, I'll go into there first, find something that they can work on the vocabulary after I've already discussed it with them, and then practice. They'll do the practice listening to the words, practice spelling of the words, and the matching. So yeah, something that's, I guess, updated, because the Learning Chocolate is not updated, so it doesn't have all these features.
Yeah, I would say once again, all of them, in the sense that you want to kind of teach the same thing in many different ways. So like you would fill out the handout, you would have, another kind of maneuver the vocabulary words to where they are, maybe fill it in on a dialogue. So I do think the one that's having ones that are kind of interactive or,
Well, I agree, Elizabeth. The dialogue, I think, would help them retain the information twice as much. So doing the image and then a dialogue would be perfect.
When you're saying image and dialogue, it would be like that word in a sentence almost. This is what you're referring to?
It wouldn't just be in a sentence, it'd be in a usage sentence. So like, where would you go to turn the volume off? Or what image represents volume? Something of that nature. Again, I'm going from basic beginners, so it's really simple, but sometimes even our high schoolers kind of need a reminder of where these things are. So it would have to be like a dual level kind of thing, something very simple, and then something for our older, our more of understanding English classes.
So what I usually do, and it kind of matters on the level, is I'll make a dialogue, but I'll also throw in some like expressions, like, like kind of speaking expressions that I wouldn't use. Like for instance, I had one just start like, hey, hey, and then you choose your partner's name. Like, hey, Amanda, hey, just to be like, okay, this is how we get people's attention. Or like, I think it's like, oh, you got it. That type of thing. So usually it would be, I don't know, be different for everything. So one I did today was, let me just drop it in the chat. Let me find it. You guys can keep talking. It'll take me a minute.
Okay. I didn't want to let me not throw something in there while she was looking for. Okay, definitely. So there is a comment in the chat. So I'll read the comment and then Yeah, whenever it kicks in, we could definitely pivot like Ross. Using AI lesson plan makers are great for repetition. Yes, if you're trying to build that routine or that that activity you want to play in different areas, that exactly it's a good way to do that. So that way, same context you're presenting in a similar way. So you're trying to control the variables as much as you can, so that they could focus on the skill and not have to figure it out too much in a controlled environment. And then what's another one? Using Google Classroom might help with routines and a place to put links to practice sites, keyboarding, Burlington English. Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, so we used back in my adult education days, and still in adult education in Britain. I'm from New Britain adult ed. Um, so yeah, we had Google Classrooms, and students were sharing the same way. Um, oh yeah, oh no, you're good, you're good. That's okay. I don't mind reading them. Um, yeah, so we would have teachers post them there. I was providing support, so they needed to help with uploading or getting things ready, and even students to access. But then students had the option to access on their phone, so they were connected to that Google Classroom. So we use that as our like their announcements, or they cancel class because of snow. It will be posted in the Google in the stream, and then they will get the notification because they had the app set up and all of that. Takes time to get to that, but then it gave them a piece of something for them to look forward to. Oh, if I have this on my phone, then I'll know if there's any cancellations, or I could send out a message to my teacher if I can't make it today, and things like that. So that was like I think out of everything in Google Classroom that we were using at the time, that really stuck to it, because then they had the opportunity to get that communication from the agency. That was that buy-in that they needed. Um, yeah.
Yeah, the Google Classroom, the stream seems to be their buy-in. Like I connected it with Facebook or Instagram. I was like to them, this is your way of just, you could write to each other for snow day or for different activities. I post photos and then I ask them to post photos as well as give me a 2 or 3 word answer of what they're doing, a response of what they're doing. So pushing snow today. I mean, that for us, there was so many of us that just, when we had those snow days in our area, that were having power issues. So then the next day they took photos and telling, like showing the branch on their power line from the day before or something of that nature. And it was it was fun. It was interesting, and we had different. Everyone experienced everything differently, and everyone got to see how everyone experienced it.
And that was like your little social media feed, you know, but
It
classroom
really
focused
was.
feed.
It was, and then you had them trying to use Google Translate to make sure that everybody understood. So they were writing it in English. And again, these are beginners. And I have one student in my class who didn't even have a phone till she attended our program. She comes from a country that it had no tech and no anything going on over there. At least in her, she was on the countryside, in her area of the countryside. So
Okay.
she's advanced quite a bit and has finally been able to write in the stream, which was amazing.
And then I think Caitlin was the one that had mentioned it earlier about the navigating of the apps. So even in this point, you're using Google Classroom, but you're focusing on the stream. So then it's limiting that exposure to everything that Google Classroom can do, but focusing on that one thing that they could then make post a reply to what was on the stream, and then it's easy for them to replicate, because there's, like Kathy would mention, she had like 5 steps, right? So you're keeping it at 5 steps, still building on that practice in developing that skill of getting accessing Google Classroom, going into the stream, being able to post, or if it was uploading an image of like how the snow was. So again, it's that repetition and trying to reduce as much noise as you can without deterring the skill.
Right. And what I love about that too is it's hard to create an environment where you're repeating the same skills over and over without all that noise you were talking about, because you want to build the confidence before you move on to too many more things and confuse it and muddy the waters. And if you have a place where it's okay, every class we're signing on and we're doing the same steps over and over in this controlled environment, then it does give that opportunity to build some confidence and kind of cement those brain pathways so that then when you're doing it on a new platform, you at least have those steps sort of in order of how it works. You have to navigate the new platform and learn that, but the muscle memory is already sort of there from what you were doing in the classroom. So I love that.
Excellent. Uh, Liz shared the poster. I was trying to pull it up over here. I can't move it from screen.
And or I don't know.
Let me
Probably.
see if I can. Let me try one more time. Oh,
Okay.
there you go. I think I
So
did.
a little long if it was beginners. I'd probably keep it to 2 or 4 lines. Um, but yeah, just give them some choices here. Like, they would, it's not exactly the same each time. So you'd like type a capital B. And if they actually can do some stuff on the computer, like I have them do it on either Google Docs or really anywhere. Okay. And then just some things like, oh, is this right? So that's something they can use all the time, right? In their life to check on things. Then I like they do yes or no, they can choose. And I usually do like a fun one, you got it. I don't think so. Like just to make it interesting.
Yeah, and then they could practice, that goes into speech. So they're reading it out, they practice communication, that speaking and listening and the follow along, and then the letter. So you're kind of doing a lot of things that uh, uh, um, you're working a lot of things at the same time versus if you just had students write, type all of the letters on the keyboard, So you're kind of giving that more depth of practice of the skill, which actually goes back to Jamie's presentation. If you haven't seen it, I'll add a slide with it. Um, um, of the recording and the slides for Digital Learning Day, which she goes also in depth of how do you develop that skill. But thank you so much for sharing. This is excellent.
Yeah, also it has a little, because a lot of times they want to learn those expressions, like more than they want to do the digital literacy. So if you kind of add that into it, it's a little bit of an enticement as well.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You're giving them what they want, and then you're bringing in that as a. It's not the main piece, but it's tied with it. Like it's like having kids eating the vegetables, right? They might not like the vegetables, but they'll have they'll eat if it's with something sweet that they're like. I'm not going to go over the slide, but we have this here that we shared on the first session, which is an interactive keyboard that you can use. And it has like a practice. They have like a if they're in pairs or in small groups that they could practice with the keyboard. It's an interactive keyboard that we put together. And then if they're doing in per independently, then it kind of shows them. And there's audio as well for them to listen to the ladder and all. So that's like a good practice activity to do between sessions or activities and things like that. And with that, we are done. Thank you so much for attending today's session. If you would like to schedule some time with Mary Kate or I in Digital TDN, you could click here to schedule a calendar session with us. And all our website information is here as well. So thank you so much again. And those that are attending CASE this Thursday and Friday, look for me. I'm going to be there. I'd like to see you guys in person. Kind of a change of pace. And also I'll be presenting Friday. Mary Kate has a session on Thursday. I have a session on Friday. And the ATN is going to have throughout the day, we have sessions all over. So Feel free to jump in, say hi. I'm gonna have a table too, so make sure to stop by, and appreciate it. Everyone, take care. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jose.